Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about forensic interview of the child, that is under Protection of Children from Sexual Offence Act of 2012. I am Dr. Suresh, Bada, Professor of Psychiatry working at NIMANS, Bangalore. Before I start my presentation, I would like to place this disclaimer. This presentation is for academic and training purpose only. For clinical opinion, please do contact a psychiatrist, and for legal opinion, contact an advocate. Conflict of interest? None. In this video, I'm going to discuss about what is forensic interviewing of the child, what should be the setting, what is the competency assessment of the child before we do forensic interview, steps to be followed, and good techniques to be followed to have a good outcome with regard to the forensic interview of the child, and conclusion. This video is targeted to doctors, psychiatrists, forensic professionals, nurses, counselors, mental health professionals, criminology professionals, officers of the observational home, advocates, judicial officers, and people working in custodial settings. Let's discuss about forensic interviewing of the child. Forensic interview is a means of gathering information from a victim or a witness for use in legal settings, especially in children. Forensic interviews are conducted by trained professionals such as psychiatrists, nurses, pediatricians, advocate, and psychologists. Forensic interviews are used by trained professionals to gather information about the incident of the alleged child sexual abuse in a manner that will yield factual information from the child and stand up to the scrutiny in the court of law. That means, if you are doing the forensic interview, it should be systematic, it should be step by step, and it should be able to withstand the scrutiny in the court of law. The purpose of this interview is to gather factual information in a legally defensible and developmentally appropriate manner about whether child has been abused. So that should be the clear goal why we are doing the forensic interview. Let's understand how the reporting of child sexual abuse usually occurs. The patients are brought by their parents directly to a doctor with the history of child sexual abuse. That is one possibility. Second one, they are brought to the doctor but they are not aware. The child has not revealed to them. These are the two possibilities when the legal fraternity is not involved. In such a scenario, under Section 19 of POCSO Act, you are mandated to inform the police. But however, if there is a referral from other department, maybe from other medical department, maybe from pediatrics, maybe from other like child welfare department. So in such a scenario, you need to check whether medical legal case is registered or not. If it is not registered, you need to register. The third, if the police has referred. If the police has referred, need not worry because already the police knew about the abuse. And even the court has referred means it is going through the legal process. Reason for forensic interviewing. Why should we do this? What is the benefit by doing this interview? First and the foremost, whether the child needs urgent medical attention is there or not, that has to be established. To get the picture of the child's emotional state, to hear the child versions of the circumstances of the abuse, to get a picture of the child's relationship with parents and the other family members, to support the child to participate in decision making. It should be age appropriate and depending upon the child's developmental maturity. To find out who the child trusts most so that they can be made available during the interviewing process. At the same time, to inform the child of any further steps to be taken in the inquiry, you have to inform the child. You should know the child what is coming up next. To convey that they are not responsible for child sexual abuse. And also to develop a plan of action. Please remember, whenever you do forensic interviewing or else whenever you get an opportunity, please try to remove the guilt from the child. Invariably, the person who has perpetrated the crime against the child will induce guilt in the child by telling, "You are so beautiful. You are compelling me to do it." So the child believes because of me, this person is losing control. And child believes he is responsible or she is responsible for child sexual abuse. They become a victim by child sexual abuse and also mentally victim because the person who was perpetrated has induced guilt in the child. Now let's understand goals of forensic interviewing. First and the foremost goal of the interview is to make the child to talk so that we get the child's verbatim report of the child sexual abuse. So you need to talk less if you are the interviewer. You should make a conducive environment where the child responds and gives the information verbatim. Ask the questions that invite the child to talk about the abuse. Always begin with the open-ended questions. Allow the child to use free narrative to collect information. That is the best interview. So the goal should be making the child to speak, and it should be voluntary. Now let's discuss about the forensic interviewing settings. What type of setting is required? Is it inpatient or outpatient? Should we do at home or else the interview should be done in a clinical setting? It should be the specialized interview. Should it be done by a trained health professional or should be a pediatrician or a nurse or a psychologist? And please remember, the child, if it is more comfortable, the more information he or she is likely to share. So, keeping all this in mind, the setting should be wherever the child is comfortable, whether it is inpatient, outpatient, or at home. If you're doing at home, make sure it is a privacy room so that nobody disturbs. Child is alone so that you can interview the child. And so there is no hard and fast rule. It has to be done in the hospital, or it should be done in the police, or it should be done in the court. Further, who should be the interviewer? Any person who has trained and knows how to handle the child, especially in a very sensitive manner. He should be doing the interview. It's not the person who is highly qualified but never trained and does not have the skill to deal the children should not involve in forensic interview. I'm repeating this. The person who is trained, who is skilled, who is sensitive to the child needs should be the interviewer. Just because somebody have multiple degrees should not be interviewing the child. And this video will not give you any skill unless you get trained, you are mentored by somebody who knows how to do the interviewing the child. Do not interview the child. Otherwise, you are going to do more harm and damage to the child than helping the child. And also, interview should be conducted in a safe, neutral, and child-friendly environment. And room needs to be child-friendly, such as some simple toys, art material, and other props should be there. It should not become too jazzy. The child does not involve in the interview and starts playing. At the same time, distractions like phone, mobile phone, other people talking in and around the room should be minimal. And also, elaborate play material should not be kept inside the room. It should be as minimal as possible. These toys should be making the child to be comfortable in the environment, and it should be to that level the child start getting engaged in the interview. And also, if you are an interview, maintain a relaxed and friendly atmosphere. And you need to keep it one thing in mind. Do not express surprise, disgust, disbelief, or other emotional reaction whenever the child describes the abuse. If the child is telling, the uncle did this to me like this, do not make any surprise or do not show your disgust. Do not do that. The more you do, the child will less it reveals. So you have to be as neutral as possible. Even if the child says, he made me to cry, you do not respond. You say, okay, tell me next, because you want to know the child's version in a neutral fashion. Neither you are going to encourage or neither you are going to discourage. You have to be as neutral as possible. Whenever you're doing the interview, avoid touching the child. Do not do that. Do not intrude into the space of the child. At the same time, do not show any feelings or else do not make any animation on your face. At the same time, do not make any false promises which you cannot keep. And sometimes If the child has mental retardation, that is intellectual disability, you may require 2 to 6 sittings to get the more information. If more than one interview is needed, then the same interviewer should interview the child. The interviewer should not change. And whenever you start the interview, have adequate time in your hand. Do not be in a hurry. Please remember, child reveals the information in installments. That means the child may say something for 5 minutes and again after 10 minutes it may reveal. Sometimes it may reveal in the next setting. And whenever you do the interview, make sure the toilet is available nearby so the child can access the toilet. Avoid noisy environment. Make sure there is no interruptions. Switch off all the cell phones and distraction. Keep refreshment ready outside the interview room so that whenever the child feels hungry, you need to give the child the food or the refreshment. And make sure it is an uncluttered environment. Whenever you're doing the interview, do not offer sweets or chocolates during the interview. It should be in between the interview so that the child knows I'll be getting whenever I'm hungry. It's not that the child demands the chocolate or the refreshment in between the interview whenever you are in a focused discussion. Now let's discuss about the planning the forensic interviewing. How should we plan? First and the foremost, before you interview the child, know the purpose. Review all the available information prior to the interview. Check the FIR. If there is any media material available, go through it. Talk to the witness, talk to the family members, talk to the investigating officer. As many as possible before you talk to the child. Have a clear idea what issues are to be discussed. Assess the condition and safety of the child at the earliest. Determine the possible need for immediate protective environment and intervention should be assessed. Any medical emergencies required or not to be assessed as and when required. Prepare the parents and caregivers. If they are going to be with the child during the interview, please tell them not to react, not to show emotions, not to cry in between, not to fight during the interview. I'm often seen when the child is revealing the abuse, the mother may start crying. If the mother starts crying, the child stops speaking because the child believes I have told something which mother is hurt. So they should not cry. They have to learn to control the emotions when the child is revealing. Not only that, the father may become angry. He may shout at the accused. So you need to prepare the father. That is basically parents. It is a very sensitive issue. It is a highly turmoil situation. So you need to prepare them before you go into the interview room. If possible, interview the child alone. That is the best way. But if the child wants the family members, you cannot stop them. You should give complete freedom to the child who is going to be inside the room. But however, you need to tell them not to react when the child reveals some surprising information. Now moving to the consent and confidentiality. Because any forensic interview, these are very essential. At the same time, you need to know attitude of your staff. If the child is waiting outside, how the staff behaves with the child. By chance, if you are doing video recording, if the videographer is inside the room, how he behaves with the child, you need to train them. Even the nurse, you need to train them. If some helper is going to be around the room, you need to train them how to behave with the child. Avoid having too many staffs during the interview and in and around the room. Children should never be interviewed in the presence of alleged accused or perpetrator. This is the need of POCSO Act. I am not telling that. You should not make the child to be in front of the perpetrator because he is going to threaten the child. That should not happen at any cost. At the same time, siblings should not be interviewed in front of the child, or the child should not be interviewed in front of his or her brothers and sisters. They need to be interviewed separately. At the same time, child and parents should be consulted if the other people are going to be inside the interview room. You need to take their consent. And also, the child's comfort with the others' presence also should be kept in mind. Please remember, confidentiality is very prime. You are not going to break the heart of the child. If the child says something confidential, be clear what can be revealed, what cannot be revealed in the presence of law. Always try to interview the child alone, especially when you are establishing the child sexual abuse. This is very important because if you are interviewing the child in front of the family members, either they may suggest the child to speak more, or else they may give certain wrong cues, or else they may themselves threaten the child. Hence, you need to interview the child as much as possible alone. By chance, there is a possibility the consent can be refused by the parents or the caregiver, or else even the child may refuse to give consent or cooperate for examination. In such a scenario, never ever force the interview on the child or else examination on the child. Never do that. If there is a refusal either from the parents or else from the child, spend time with the child and the caregivers, explaining the procedure, need for medical care, need for fighting of the justice, and the accused or the perpetrator is at large. He may harm other children. Take them into confidence. If the child doesn't have emergency, especially medical emergency, take 2-3 settings in preparing the child, preparing the family members to go through this forensic interviewing. If there is a delay, inform the court, inform the investigating officer. There has been new developments where parents are not cooperating, or else the parents are very apprehensive, or else the child is very apprehensive, child is very anxious. You need to convey them and never make sure never intimidate the child or the parents, telling that if you don't cooperate, the court will take seriously. Don't do that. Never do the intimidation because it is their fight. You have to be supportive with them. You should help them. Our first goal is to heal the child. Second goal is fighting for justice. So make sure all possible measures taken so that the child is healed. The child recovers from the abuse. That should be your prime motto. Let's understand if there is a joint interview with the family members is done. As much as possible, child should be interviewed individually. And again, even the family members should be interviewed separately. If you are going to have a joint interview, prepare the family members first. Talk to them and tell them not to react, not to make any disgusting face. They have to be silent. And also make sure reduce the possibility of influence by the caregivers on the child's statement. Because sometimes either the parents, like father and mother, may induce the child to tell more or less. If more than one interview is needed, the same interviewer or the interpreter should interview the child. The interviewer should not change from one setting to another setting because the child finds it very difficult to adjust with the next person. Do not change the place of interview. If it is a multiple interview, the same place should be chosen so that the child is very comfortable in the similar surroundings. Now let's move into the important points which an interviewer should remember. The child may be exhausted when you do the interview. They would have traveled all along, or else the child is going through a turmoil. Even the parents are going through a turmoil. Hence, you need to take frequent breaks. And also, repeatedly check with the child whether the child is thirsty or hungry. And also, avoid using the leading questions. Always ask open-ended questions. Avoid questioning the child. Why? Why he behaved in a particular way? Why he did not tell the family members? Why he did not go to the police? Don't ask why. Because if you ask why, the child thinks that I have been blamed, or else I am the reason for child sexual abuse. So never use why questions. Ask simple questions. If the child is young, you need to be very simple questions. Do not ask complicated questions. Do not ask 2 questions at the same time. And the interviewer should be comfortable with the silence during the interview. The child may take time to respond. It may wait for 20 seconds, 30 seconds. The interviewer should not go on coercing the child to respond immediately. Give legendary pause so that the child responds in its own time. Whenever you are mentioning a name, use the name of the accused. which the child knows. If the child says, Uncle, you ask Uncle so and so did this. Did Uncle Raj did this? Be very specific because the child may think somebody else. Hence, you have to be very specific, use the name of the person, and the child should know whom you are referring to. If the child is below 3 to 5 years, you have to be very careful. You need to take a lot of time. If the child is more than 7 years, 1 or 2 sitting is enough. If the child is cognitively well developed and has a good vocabulary, you can do the forensic interview in a single setting. Depending upon the child's maturity, you need to take time. You may need to have multiple settings. And one more important thing, avoid correcting the child during the interview. Do not correct the child's behavior, words, or vocabulary. If the child says something else to pennies, you don't say it is pennies. Don't call it as VVV because the child has its own vocabulary about the understanding about things. Don't correct it. If you do that, child thinks I'm telling something wrong and child will stop saying it. If the child uses new vocabulary, ask the child to explain it. Can you tell me more about it? Do not correct. Do not correct the behavior of the child. If the child is shouting, allow the child to shout because you want to know the emotional reaction of the child. Do not correct the vocabulary of the child. If the child says something in English, allow the child to speak. Don't correct it. If you correct, that means the child believes I am saying something wrong. At the same time, when 2 or more professionals are inside the interview room, make sure only one person interacts with the child. The other members either take notes or they just observe it. Better, they may be watching it on CCTV or else through a one-way mirror. Never 2-3 people do interviewing the child. The child will become very confused. Single interviewer should do the interview. The others should take notes or else should be outside the room watching through CCTV or else one-way mirror. This is very essential. The child is not accused. You are not doing interrogation of the child. A single interviewer where the child relates to that adult should be the person who is interviewing the child. Child may experience difficulty with concept of time. The child may not understand what is 2 months back, what is 1 year back, what is 3 months back, or maybe 2 weeks back. Hence, you need to link with the child's major activities in the child life like school events, morning, before breakfast, after the lunch or before the lunch, once you reach the house, or else in the taxi. These are the questions you should be very clear. And also before the birthday, after the birthday, because nowadays the children remember their birthday very well. So you need to anchor the questions with regard to passage of time. Do not ask the child, was it 3 months back? The child does not understand what is 3 months. How many days has been passed? Hence, anchor that with the life events. Avoid suggestible questions. If you give suggestible questions, that will not stand in the court of law. Avoid repeating the same question in a high tone. If the child has answered the question, you can ask, can you explain more in detail? Do not repeat the same question. If you ask the same question 4 or 5 times to the child will think, I am telling something wrong, and it may not reveal the full information. Hence, avoid repeating the questions, avoid raising the voice with the child. Be comfortable, calm, and in simple way you should ask the question. And at the same time, avoid discussing in front of the child. Do not discuss with the lawyer or with the family members. Do not do that. Child will be perplexed. What is going on? You need to respect the child and you will engage the child when the child is interviewed. Do not discuss. Interview procedures may be modified in case involving very young children, especially intellectual disability, or else the child has speech disability, or else hearing disability. In such a scenario, you may need to involve the interpreters. That is allowed under Section 39 of POCSO Act. Now let's discuss about children with special needs. Children may have special needs, either physical or mental. These children who are disabled, either physically or mentally, they are very vulnerable. The people who are antisocials, The pedophiles will target these disabled children because if the child is unable to speak, it is very easy to abuse and take advantage of the child. If the child is mentally ill, again, the perpetrator will take this advantage of the child's mental illness. Hence, please remember the disabled children are at high risk. Respect the child's wishes to have or not to have a particular person during the interview. Avoid using a relative or friends of the child as an interpreter because it comes with its own positive and negative things. Hence, you need to be neutral. Avoid using family members as the interpreter. But however, in certain situation, when child is very young and child has different sensory disabilities and it's very difficult to communicate, in such a scenario, you may have to use the family members. Please document and also prepare the family member who is going to be the interpreter, telling that you have to report verbatimly. And whenever there is an interpreter with the child, talk to the child directly. Do not look at the interpreter or the guardians. You will directly talk to the child. The interpreter will directly interpret and talk to the child. That means both of them will engage the child. You are not going to speak to the interpreter. The interpreter has to listen to you, but you will make the eye contact with the child, even if you are speaking in a different language. But however, please remember that the person who is going to interview should be as much as possible from the same language which the child speaks. Beware, some of the child may have cognitive decline or else poor cognitive abilities or else mental retardation, and they may be easily distracted. Hence, sometimes you need to do IQ assessment. However, it is not mandatory for all forensic interviewing. If child is suffering from mental illness, please treat the mental illness first. Then only you have to do the interview. Assure that the child is not at fault for the child sexual abuse. As I mentioned earlier, the accused or the perpetrator would have induced guilt in the child, and child is responsible for child sexual abuse. That is the way these pedophiles do it. Now let's understand about the forensic interviewing and what are the stages. Please remember, there are 6 different stages. First, introduction, rapport building, and knowing the chronological event, how the abuse occurred, transition from one topic to another topic, gathering detail and corroboration one event to another event, and closure. But remember this, these steps are there to guide you. They are not hard and fast rule. Now whatever I am going to discuss, it should be in a semi-structured way. This should lead to a guide towards a good systematic interview. It should be as much as possible semi-structured. You should have certain questions, but you need to be flexible. You need to take the lead from the child, how the child performs during the interview. Depending upon the child's response, you need to frame your questions. Although you have your own stock of questions, but go with the child. Flow with the child's testimony. First, introduction. Interviewer should introduce himself or herself to the child. You need to say, I am so and so. I am here to help you. I am a doctor. I am here to help you. Explain the documentation process. If there is a video recording is there, if you're going to take notes, please explain the child and tell that I'm making notes so that I remember it. And also make sure the child also introduce himself or herself and ask what is the age of the child, whether they live, where they live, school, grade, and friends, so that the child becomes comfortable with the interviewer. And when you are building rapport, talk about the neutral topics, such as where is your school? Okay, tell me how many friends you have. In school, what are the activities you do? What games you play? What are the hobbies you have? Okay, tell me about the football you recently played. Tell me about your friends. Tell me about the family. Tell me about the recent events which took place at your home. So these are the essential rapport building activities to be done. Once you have fairly developed the rapport, enter into the main part of the interview. That is, you need to do developmental assessment, second, competency assessment, and evidence proper. You need to do this in a systematic manner so that it can stand the scrutiny of the lawyer or the scrutiny of the court so that evidence is accepted. Let's now look at the developmental assessment. The first and the foremost, the developmental assessment of the child is done. So the defendant lawyer should not say that child is not able to understand what the question is asked, or else child is too young to understand what has happened to him, or else the child is speaking irrelevantly. That should not happen. Hence the developmental assessment to be done. In the developmental assessment, you will do a general intelligence to the age of the child, appropriate to the age of the child. That is what I'm telling. Comprehension, whether the child is able to understand the question you are making, whether the child is able to retain the information, whether it is able to recall the information, and what is the communicable ability. If the child is more than 6 to 7 years, all these will be there, and the child can be a good witness, or the child can give a good evidence. But if the child is below 7 years, these needs to be established properly. Be clear. If the child is less than 7 year olds, you have to establish this clearly. To know the child's intelligence, ask general questions. Either maybe about the class, about the family, about the current events, about the child, what type of car it loves, or else what type of animals it likes. Whenever the child speaks, do not correct the child with the new words. Ask with the simple words. Do not introduce new words to the child. Do not bring legal jargon in front of the child. The child need to know very simple language. Vocabulary of the child to be noted when the questions are asked. Now you need to ask age-dependent questions. Tell me your name, your age, where do you live? Tell me near your house, what are the things you do? Tell me what is the nearest place you like to go. Tell me name of your school. Tell me the address of your school. Tell me address of your home. Tell me your parents' name. Tell me about your siblings' name. Tell me the food, what you like. Why do you like so much? What is the color of various things? It may be available, like maybe the color of the book, maybe clothes. Those can be asked. Ask about the child's friend's name. Why do they like him? Why do he or she likes him? Ask about one general school day. Tell me about at what time you go to school and how do you spend time in the whole day in the school. Ask that. Ask about the teacher's name. Ask about one recent birthday celebration. Invariably, majority of the children, if they are young, they remember their birthdays. They know what present they have got. How did they cherish it? How did they use those gift can be discussed. When the child is talking about those, assess the child's intelligence. Talk about the movie if it has seen recently. Talk about if there is any computer games or else real game if the child is talking about. Now enter into the body inventory. The body inventory becomes very essential to know to what level the child is able to name the body parts. Further, you need to know the developmental assessment. Tell us about things you like to do. That should be the question. Like for example, would you like to go for shopping? Tell me what you do during the shopping. Tell me what did you buy? How much this pencil cost? How many pencil you have? How many pencil your friends have? Tell me the name of the pencil. Tell us about your last birthday. Tell us everything happened on that day. What did you do on the birthday? How many gifts you got? Which was the gift you liked most? Tell me, what made you to like that gift? Tell us about the recent festival you celebrated. Okay, did you celebrate recent Deepavali? How much cracker did you burst? Did you like crackers? Or you don't like crackers? How do you celebrate Deepavali? So these are the things you should ask. Tell us about your recent trip you went with your family. Maybe going to Goa or else maybe Uttarakhand. Ask such questions so that the child will be able to give a complete information where you will be able to assess the child's vocabulary, intelligence, comprehension. Child is able to recall. If possible, ask the family members what did the child was able to tell correctly or not. Entering into the body part inventory. If you are examining the male child, ask the child to name the body parts on their own body. Ask where is your nose? Where is your tongue? Where is your right hand? Where is your left hand? Do this if the child is below 6 to 7 years. For elderly children, not required. If it is a female child, ask the child to name their body parts. Ask them specifically. And if the child is not able to do that, use the diagram and ask the children to name them. If the child is telling something wrong, do not correct the child here. If you do that, you will lose the rapport with the child. Please remember, do not do this with the children more than 7 years. This body part inventory should be done if the child is less than 5 to 6 years. 1. And depending upon the child's developmental and cognitive ability, you need to do this. This is not required for all children, especially body part inventory. Moving to the competency assessment. This is a very important part of the forensic interviewing of the child. You have to do this competency assessment. The reason being is whether the child knows the difference between truth and lie, false and truth, whether the child is able to distinguish it, whether the child is able to do promise, able to understand oath. And the child also should understand it should not do guesswork. The child should be given permission to say, I don't know. The child should be given permission to correct the advocate or else the interviewer. And the child should say, it is wrong if it is something is told wrong to the child. So this has to be established before you do the evidence interview properly. So this is done in a simple way. Show this diagram and ask, the bus is flying. The child will say, no, it is aeroplane. Now you have to say, very good. I was wrong, you are right. Then you need to ask the child, who was right, who was wrong. The child will say, I am right, you are wrong. That means indirectly you are giving the permission to the child to tell the advocate, if you are wrong, I will tell you wrong. Next, you can again bring another one. See, this lady is saying that elephant is walking. The child will say, no, it is a lorry which is going there. Again, you need to repeat, yes, you are right. Dr. Suresh is wrong. Then you need to ask the child who is right and who is wrong. That means you have to establish and tell the child, you have a permission to say, if I am wrong, you should say it is wrong. If you are right, you should insist I am right. That permission has to be established. Now you should ask, is Raju no? The child will say, no, it is Doraemon. Use these to know whether the child is able to remember, recall, and also to correct the advocate or the interviewer that it is right or wrong. That means you are able to establish the difference between right or wrong, true or false. Further, again you can show one more photograph and say, he is Rani or she is Rani. It says, no, it is Doraemon. Again you are right. The child will be very happy. You are building the rapport. You are establishing the competency of the child. You can say, he is my friend Rakesh. The child will say, no, he is Gyan. Gyan from Doraemon cartoon. Again, you have to establish the right or wrong. And now you should ask, is my friend Shizuka? The child will say, no, it is Nobita. That means you are now giving a complete freedom to the child to say what is right, what is wrong. You may have to do this so that the child has understood the concept. The child believes that if it is right, he will say right. If it is wrong, it is wrong. And you have to now ask, is my friend Shizuka? The child will say, yes, it is Shizuka. Both of us are right. The child now understand the concept. Both of us are also right. Now you say, is Superman? The child says, no, it is Spider-Man. Now you are making the complete assessment about the understanding about right or wrong. Similarly, you say he is a Superman. Child says, yes, it is Superman. Then again, reinforce. Both of us are right. That means you are also right. I am also right. Now you say he is a Chota Beam. Yes, it is Chota Beam. And at the same time, you also bring in a couple of other diagrams like telling that he is a lion. Child will say, no, it is a rabbit or a bunny. Further, now you need to bring in the concept of I don't know. Ask the child, who is the Prime Minister? Child, if it answers, fine. If it is unable to answer, good. If you don't know the answer, you say, I don't know. Nobody is going to penalize you. Good. At the same time, you ask, who is the principal of your school? Child doesn't know. Say, I don't know. Don't worry. If you don't know, you say, I don't know. So you are giving the permission to the child to say, I don't know. Ask, If the child is in third standard, ask the child who is the teacher in the fifth standard A section. Of course, the child may not know. And again, you say, if you don't know, don't worry. You say, I don't know. Similarly, you need to say you have been permitted to say, I don't know. That has to be clearly told. And during the interview, ask, pointing at somebody, who is he? And the child doesn't know. Don't worry. You say, I don't know. I don't know who is he. So you have given the permission to the child to say, I don't know, and the child understands the concept of I don't know. So in the competency assessment, you have done all these things. To say what is right, what is wrong, given permission the child to say if the advocate or the interviewer is wrong, and also you have told the child to say, I don't know if he doesn't know. And also ask about your family members. Ask, what is your name? What is your dad's name? What is your mom's name? Sister's name? School's name? So when you tell all these things, you bring in the concept of promise me you will tell the truth. Of course, some of the researchers believe if you take promise with the child, most of the children will say truth. That means taking promise will play a role similar to taking oath in the court of law. However, some of the researchers are critical about this, but I do find it helpful if you are able to build a very good rapport with the child by this time and the child believes you. It is no harm in taking this small promise, telling that hereafterwards whatever you tell, it will be promise between you and me, and in this court or in this interview room, child will be very happy. That means whatever the child is revealing to you, it will be kept confidential, and be very clear. You will be telling only to the court or to the judge. That if the child knows, having this promise will play a major role. At the same time, you need to have some ground rules. Address the child by name. Do not call with the short names Pappu, Chinnu, Aparanji, because these are the words used by the perpetrator. The person who grooms the child for the abuse will use these names. Do not do that. Avoid giving sweets and toys or chocolates, because the person who has abused the child would have done the same thing by giving chocolate after he would have abused the child. Do not do that. And whenever you ask questions, be gentle with the child. Do not lose patience. Use appropriate body gestures. Do not make exaggerated gestures. Do not show you are disinterested. Maintain eye contact with the child. Be comfortable with the silence. You need to have frequent breaks if the child is very tired. Make yourself free to the interview for the child. Many a time, it may require half a day, 3 to 4 hours. So in between breaks are very essential. And now once you have done the developmental assessment and you have established the competency and you have given the permission to the child to say yes or no, wrong questions, giving permission to child to say the interviewer is wrong, and also permission to say I don't know. If this is done, move into the important part, that is asking questions about the incident. Now start with the open question. Ask, tell me, why are you here today? What brings you here? Ask in open-ended questions, and as much as possible use the child vocabulary or words. And when the child is speaking, do not correct the child. Follow with the focused follow-up questions. Tell me about that. I heard that recently you need to go to the hospital. Tell me something about it. I heard that something happened in your school. Can you tell me about that? Tell me everything about that from the beginning to end. Such a way should be the opening-ended questions. And ask them, did this happen one time or more time? Focus on single event and then start with the last event and then move towards the previous event. That means the incident which has occurred recently should be focused first, because the child will be able to remember and will be able to explain beautifully. If you are able to get that first, going to the previous one will be easy. And also avoid why questions. Ask who, what, where, when and how. And asking why will be difficult because the child may not respond. At the same time, how it started, how it ended should be asked for each event. Be sure to clarify the details between different events. Ask any follow-up questions necessary for you to understand what happened. Ask the child if there is something you forgot to ask or to tell. so that the child will be comfortable to add in between. Some of the questions I would like to give you some hints. At the same time, this can be used in your forensic interviewing. Tell me prompt is the best one. Tell me everything that happened on that day. Tell me everything from the beginning to end. Tell me everything, even the little things you think it is not important. Tell me everything. Tell me how it started. So these are the prompt questions can be asked. You told me that yesterday it happened. Tell me everything about that. So use this tell me. That is will be very essential. And you also can say, I want to understand about the event. Tell me what happened. Moving, then asking, what happened next? What happened next will encourage the child to tell about the events. That means it should be open-ended. I want to understand. Tell me what happened next. That should be the best way to ask question. Time segmentation prompt is also very essential. Tell me everything that happened from meeting the uncle until you met your mom or when you came back home. Tell me everything that happened on the day of from the morning to evening. So you are giving a complete time frame in which the child will recall and tell. So time segmentation is very essential so the child knows it is speaking from this time to this time. Sometimes you need to use sensory focus question. These are highly loaded. Child may become highly distressed. You need to be ready, but they are very, very helpful in evidence. Tell me everything you saw at that time. Tell me everything you heard. Did accused say something? You need, instead of accused, you have to use the name of the accused. If the child knows it is Raju uncle, you should say, did Uncle Raju say something to you? Tell me everything what Uncle Raju said to you on that time. So that should be the way the sensory focus question should be there. At the same time, you also need to ask open-ended WH questions. That is who, what, where and how. What did he do with his hand? Tell me all the person who did that. Who are those person? What did they do to you? That means you need not ask 3 questions at a time. You should ask 1 question at a time. Tell me all about the places where this has happened. Who took you there? How did you go there? Who was there with you? So these are the questions. Open-ended questions without closed-ended questions should be the way to do the interview. Feeling questions should be also asked. These open-ended feeling questions describes the child's physical and emotional feelings and reactions and thought process during the abuse. You need to ask, how did you feel when Raju uncle touched you? What did you think when Raju uncle did this to you? How did you feel when he touched you many times? How did you feel when you went to the bathroom? So you need to ask, feel. Don't ask directly, was there a pain when you went to bathroom? Don't do that. You are suggesting. Ask, when did you go to the bathroom after the event? How did you feel when you went to the bathroom? What did you do after the incident? What did he tell you after the incident? What did you tell before the incident? How did you feel about everything that has happened to you? So these are the questions about the feeling should be asked. Now coming to the cued related questions. That means cue recall questions should be used. Cued invitation, especially when the cues are action oriented. The cue should be chosen from the previous statement of the child. You said, the uncle gave you a chocolate and took you to his home. Tell me more about the things what happened at home. I heard something about recently uncle came and took you to a hotel. Tell me what happened in the hotel. So you need to give the cue to the child so that the child takes from there. And also you need to ask, what was the worst thing he did to you? Here again the name of the accused should be used. What was the last thing he did to you? What did you do when it was over? When did you go to the toilet? How did you feel when you went to the toilet? So these are the cued recall questions. Coming to the last point, disclosure questions. These are essential to know whether the child disclosed to somebody. When, how did they react? What made them to disclose? First, Was someone else was there when this happened? Tell me, who are all there when this happened? Who was the first person who came to know about this? How did they find out this has happened with you? What were you thinking when you told about this event? What did Uncle Raju say and did to you? Or else, what did the person tell you when you have revealed to them? What do you think when you are told to them? What made you to decide to tell them? So these are the questions should be asked. When did you tell? Did you tell anybody else? When was this? How did they react when you disclosed? So these are the questions you should ask. Now, coming to the focusing event per se, that means you need to remember when an event of child sexual abuse has been disclosed, you need to ask all of this. Description of the event, identity of the accused or the perpetrators, whether the allegation was single event, multiple event, whether there was a single person who abused or multiple people, presence and the identity of the other witnesses if they are there, who saw the event, who saw when the child was taken, and at the same time whether similar events have happened to the other children, whether the child told anyone about the event, the time frame, location, venue, if the child is able to remember, excellent. Alternative explanation for the allegation also should be asked, but you need to be very sensitive. It should be done in the end, not in between, because you're trying to do an allegation to the child that they are lying. So never do it in the early part or in the middle. Do it in the end, using anatomical dolls and diagrams during the forensic interview. This has been highly controversial. Many of the researchers say using the cue for anatomical dolls or diagram could trigger the child's recognition of the body-related experiences. It is good, you will get a detailed events, but there is a possibility of false positive events also can be reported. Hence, few researchers clearly indicate that the first and the foremost thing to be done is the child should say with a free association. There should not be any doll or diagram to be available to the child when it is discussing and telling about the abuse. And this, if you are going to use dolls and diagram, it should be the last resort. And it should be done in the end, not in the beginning. Further, you need to use a proper anatomical doll. And the doll should be clothed. If you are using the male doll, the male appropriate culturally appropriate clothes should be worn. It should not be a Western clothes if you are talking to a traditional child. Hence, appropriate clothing is required. And one should be trained in using the doll for inquiry. Just because you got a doll, don't use it. And just because you got a proper anatomical doll, you are going to use it completely wrong. You have to be trained. And do not use these dolls and diagram routinely. It's very essential. If you are going to use it in the end. And it should be used to get more information. And doll should be used only after establishing that the abuse has occurred. And it should be, the abuse should be established in free association. It should be used to get more details only. No leading or suggestive question should be used when you are using the doll or diagrams. It's very essential. Now coming to the last part, what are the good techniques to be done during forensic interview? First and the foremost, the good interviewer should put the child at ease. And the child should be more comfortable. If the child is more comfortable, you will get more information. Warm and friendly presence is required for the interviewer. Gentle persistence should be there. Knowing how much to push, when to stop. Allowing for silence. That means spacing the question. Allowing for the pause. Allowing the child to respond. Child may sometimes take time to respond. And you need to use the language which is developmentally appropriate to the child. Avoid leading questions. Never suggest to the child. Never threaten the child. Avoid correcting the child during the interview. Don't add new words in the interview. Talk less. Advise less. Suggestion less. Allow the child to speak more. No lecturing, no criticizing. No correcting the child. No introduction of new terms. No raising of voice, either against the child or else against the subordinate. I have seen some of the forensic interviewer, they are very gentle with the child. They are doing the interview. Suddenly somebody comes into the room, they will shout at them. The child will be threatened. Though you are shouting at the third party, child will become silent. Don't do that. Your behavior should be consistent in front of the child. And coming to the take-home message, Section 39 of POCSO Act clearly says that during the child interview, pre-trial, during the trial or post-trial, an interpreter, special educator, or any other professional who is required to give evidence or help the court to give evidence to be summoned and appropriately paid. And the child is not to be called repeatedly to testify in the court of law. Hence, the interpreter or the special educator or a counselor or a psychiatrist may take time and do a good interview. And within 1 year, the POCSO case has to be closed, and then it will be serving the justice. That is as per the POCSO Act. Forensic interviewing is an extremely valuable tool for the investigation of a child abuse allegation. When properly executed, it can assist in gathering factual information about the allegation and using legally defensible techniques. That means it can withstand the scrutiny of the court and the defendant lawyer. Trust the child. If the child says it has undergone child sexual abuse, never ever suspect the child. No child wants to say that has happened to him. So, if the child says the abuse has occurred, please trust the child. Main goal of the forensic interview should be mental examination, physical examination, healing of the child. That should be the prime. Secondary is justice. Child should be healed. That should be the prime motto. Need to deal with the child victim and their family is essential. Because if you want to give a good evidence and good witness of the child, you need to take care of the family. You need to support the family. You need to support the family emotionally, and also to provide social welfare and well-being of the child victims, particularly when the abuser is the parent or the guardian of the child. Imagine if the father is the abuser of the child. You need to involve many social welfare agencies, legal aid clinic, child welfare committee. So you have to be very, very proactive in supporting the child. At the same time, make sure secondary victimization of the child does not occur in delivery of the justice. Maybe even in the court of law, maybe in the hospital. Make sure secondary victimization is avoided. Thank you very much for giving your valuable time. Stay safe.